истинный в огне. Кто читает свои сны, поклоняюсь темноте.
Day 2. Demons. Now, what kind of hell story would be complete without demons? Certainly not the one I'm telling you guys right now. I'll warn you, these things are creatures you never want to find yourself face to face with. These malevolent beings will haunt my dreams for the rest of my days. Our first full day of being snowed in began with me waking up at around 9 a.m. I remembered the screams of terror I thought I'd heard the night before. The sun was finally out, burning brightly in the sky, yet doing nothing to melt the ungodly portion of snow dumped on our town the day before. Surprisingly, the rooftop camera was still functional. Thank God for our backup generator. If we didn't have that, we'd be in the same position as the rest of the town, utterly without electricity. My father said the generator had enough power to last us for about 2 weeks. 3 if we were frugal with its usage. It was disconcerting to know how prepared he was for this situation, almost as if he had lived through something like this in the past. When I had the view of our rooftop camera, I could see the snow beautifully glistening in the sunlight like diamonds. What I saw in our streets made me want to vomit. Made me wish my dad had never put up those cameras. The people I had seen the night before were horrifically mutilated. Blood stained the snow around what were formerly several human bodies. I couldn't tell how many there were originally because the bodies all looked like they had been through a paper shredder and then a blender afterwards for good measure. Bloody paste and splintered bones littered the streets outside the house. The winter coats these poor souls had worn were now in nothing but tatters. Whatever did this, I didn't want to find out. Was this why my parents had built a multi-level bunker under our home? Did they know more than they were letting on? I thought for sure they knew something, but I had no way of proving it. I was about to go find my father when I heard it. I knew that sound. The only sound it could be was something digging through hardly packed snow. Whatever it was, digging at the snow surrounding our house frantically. Was it an animal, or was someone looking for survivors? I put in a command for the rooftop camera to tilt forward to take a look at what was digging. What I saw made me jump from my chair and almost made my heart jump out of my chest. This was the first of many different demons I would see that day. Standing directly above the front door to our house, clawing away at the densely packed snow, was a being I'd only read about online or heard about in stories from the local Native Americans. An emaciated body, so pale it almost blended in perfectly with the surrounding white backdrop. A human-shaped head, horrid, rotting antlers, and long, clawed fingernails were this monstrosity's grotesque characteristics. I now had my answer as to what had ground my fellow men outside into a human Bloody Mary. A Wendigo. So the old myth about them coming with the most violent of snowstorms was true. It's disgusting. Labored breathing filled the speakers. It eventually hit snow so densely packed it couldn't break through no matter how hard it tried. This angered the beast so greatly that it let out an ear-splitting shriek of rage. However, it was not deterred from its ultimate goal of getting into our house. I watched as it continued continued to claw furiously at the snow until I heard something snap. The Wendigo had broken its wrist, and let out a shriek even greater than the one previous. So loud, in fact, I could hear its echo from all the way from outside the house without need of the computer's audio assistance. Once again, undeterred, it soldiered on through its mission of bloodlust. At this point, I knew I had to find my dad. Maybe he would know what to do. Maybe his army experience would come in handy. I rushed out of my room to find my dad, getting ready to head up to sub-level 1. Something strange was going on. Even stranger than having a colossal emergency bunker under our house strange. He was dressed in a full uniform, obviously army, but not any army uniform I'd ever seen before. His ensemble included full black body armor, a helmet with a black visor tinted dark enough that it was impossible to see his face beneath it, and a P90 as his weapon of choice. He looked a lot like an ODST, or Orbital Drop Shock Trooper, from the Halo games, if you want to really picture it in your head. There was a strange insignia on his armor's chestplate over his heart. It looked like a bright silver letter V encircled by a red oval. I had no idea what that meant, but it clearly meant that he had been in a kind of special forces while in the army. My giant of a father turned to me and took off his helmet, revealing his battle-scarred face. "You saw it too, didn't you, son?" he asked me calmly. Yeah, was all I could fearfully muster up the will to say. In response, my father put his large right hand on my shoulder and gave it a nice pat. "I've dealt with these things before. They're truly nasty bastards." "Oh, wait, what do you mean? You're not going up there, are you?" "Someone's gotta keep us safe, son," my father said solemnly as he started up the ladder. I tugged at his shoulder, as I would have done when I was 5 years old, not wanting him to leave for work in the morning. "Look, Dad, if you're going up there, you're not going alone. I'm coming with you." My father continued his recent streak of acting strangely and cracked a smile whilst letting out a chuckle. "I always wondered when you joined the family business, Ryan. This really isn't the way I wanted you to find out about it, though. But I'm still proud. Come down to the 3rd floor with me. We need to get you prepped, my boy." I did as my father said, and the rest of our family was still holed up in their rooms doing who knows what. Surely they had to have heard something, or maybe they were in too much fear to move. We descended the ladder at the end of a narrow hallway leading out of the living room to find ourselves in a brightly lit room full of military equipment, weapons, uniforms, and more. My mouth was agape in awe of the spectacle I was beholding. Yet another computer sat in the center of the room, now showing that another 4 Wendigos had joined their comrade in the pursuit of human flesh. They were making quick work of the snow barrier that protected our home, working in perfect unison, shoveling away our first line of defense. My father had a uniform identical to his for me to put on. After I adorned myself with my new garb, my dad led me to the weapons rack from which I took a flamethrower, much to his delight. Then we heard it through the camera audio. The splintering of wood. The Wendigos were now in our house and rushing to the basement in competition to see which one of them would have the chance to sink their teeth and claws into us first. Luckily, the narrow hallways slowed them down, as they proved to be too small for their wide antlers to fit through without turning sideways. But one of the more ambitious monsters thrust itself through, breaking off both antlers and causing it to let loose a scream of agony. We raced up to sub-level 1 and now stood directly under the trapdoor that the beasts were now pounding on relentlessly to no avail. Whoever constructed the steel door did a fantastic job. It budged not once, no matter how hard the Wendigos seemed to pound on it. My father walked over to a keypad next to the ladder and typed in a 4-digit code, which allowed for the door to slide back, revealing a layer of a metal grid. It would be just big enough for the barrel of my flamethrower to fit through, to burn the pale bastards to death. With some hesitation, I finally worked up enough false courage to begin the ascent to meet the beasts. When I reached the 4th rung from the top, I poked the barrel of my flamethrower through the hole and pulled the trigger. Every Wendigo above shrieked in pain, creating a cacophony of agony. Normally, I would hate the sound, but this was like music to my ears. I was making those that threaten my home and family pay dearly for their transgression. My father motioned for me to come down from the ladder so he could go up. What would a P90 do to a Wendigo? Unless it had silver bullets for ammunition. My father quickly climbed up to the same rung I had been on moments earlier, P90 in hand, to finish them off. He fired off a single round, but what came out was not a bullet. Rather, it was a small beam of bright white light that disintegrated one of the Wendigos on impact. He dispatched of the others without a problem, leaving not a single trace of their former physical being to be found. When the beasts were defeated, the trapdoor sealed up once again, and it felt as if the oppressive atmosphere that had been hanging in the air since yesterday lifted somewhat. My father climbed down the ladder and placed his hand firmly on my shoulder again. "Good job, son," he congratulated. "You'll make a fine soldier." "Thanks, Dad," I replied shakily. I felt adrenaline coursing through my veins still, but I hoped I'd never have to face anything like that again. I could feel the evil that they exude. It felt as if they were evil for the sake of being evil. We went back to monitoring the cameras outside the house. More Wendigos and other demons stalked the street outside. The hole where the demons had broken in caved in when the snow gave way. All manner of other hellspawn roamed the streets. Many looked like humanoid versions of animals and your stereotypical depictions of demons. Wendigos would be by far the least dangerous of this influx of monsters. We returned to sub-level 2 to make sure the rest of the family was alright. My mother was wearing one of the same suits that my father and I had put on earlier. Graham and Cynthia were still in their normal clothes, and it appeared that they were just as frightened as I was, but had no grasp on the situation at hand. What exactly was it that my father had done in the army? Someone needed to do some explaining. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded of my mother. She was clearly taken aback at this due to the expression of shock from my outburst. This expression was replaced by one that carried such a serious weight that I could almost feel it weighing me down physically. "Ryan, you have every right to know. You all do," she said, gesturing me and both of my siblings, who were still too frightened to speak. "This isn't the first time that this has happened. 20 years ago, another portal from hell opened in Russia, but they were able to close it before this stage. If we survive, you all have to remember that the first sign is a violent snowstorm. Not the first time? Gran repeated and asked simultaneously. Throughout humanity's history, events like this have happened, but the closeness and time is increasing. Eventually, the winters will be worldwide and never end. Even though the Vikings of Norse legend were never considered the brightest, they did get one thing right. They predicted this. They called it Ragnarok. My mother answered. My head was spinning. I had heard of Ragnarok when we studied Norse mythology my sophomore year of high school, but I never believed it could be true. The end of the world. Maybe this was just the first stage, and there was still a chance of us stopping it. Cynthia spoke next. What are we gonna do? It's not like we can take on those things. My father's voice sounded worried when he came up with an answer. We can't do it ourselves, but I do know some people who can help. He pulled a small circular device out of his breast pocket and tapped the button in the center, then typed in what seemed to be a series of numbers. Was this some kind of phone? I went with yes once someone answered on the other line. They spoke in a strange language I had never heard before. It sounded otherworldly, and I can't even describe what it sounded like. It was obviously not human in origin. My father responded in kind, speaking in that strange language. The one single word I could make out was Glasgow, our family name. Maybe this was an old military contact, but did that mean our US military had been in league with aliens or some other creatures that we didn't know about? My father replayed the device in his breast pocket and sighed. I've got good news and bad news. Good news first, Cynthia said impatiently. They can send help. Cynthia cut him off. Great, how long till they get here? You didn't let me finish, and that's the bad news. We're on our own for 2 days. They won't make it here any sooner, so we'll have to hold out until then. My father replied as he slumped down into the chair directly behind him, hung his head and clasped his hands together. His face wore a look of defeat. I had never seen this man, who I always viewed as someone who could never waver and his optimism crumble like that. This was the most frightening part of being trapped underground. Not the incredible amount of snow or demons, but my father looking so crushed. After we all tried consoling him for what seemed like hours, he finally cheered up enough to take a stand. I decided it was time to survey the cameras again. The rooftop camera became my personal favorite as it showed the most of what was going on outside. It was almost like watching a nature documentary about hell, its food chain, and the demons that call it home. I'm sure you're curious about what different types of demons we had prowling the town, so I'll give you guys a few examples. As I told you before, the lesser demons like Wendigos, skinwalkers, werewolves, and vampires were at the bottom of the food chain, as far as demons were concerned. The pattern I noticed was that the older the demons were in mythology, the more power they were granted. The mid-level demons, which are the most abundant, included but weren't limited to those found in Greek, Roman, or Egyptian myths. Minotaurs, cyclopses, ogres, giants, sphinxes, even dragons. You should have somewhat of an understanding by now. The monsters mentioned above were easy prey for the older, more powerful demons, but that doesn't mean that they leave humans off of their menu. More like a delicacy to them, as they rarely get a chance to enter our world to devour us. The mid-level freaks strutted around like they owned the place, but cowered in fear when The Archfiends, the pinnacle of power across all panels of existence, made their presence known. Archfiends are the fewest in number, but they more than make up for it with their destructive power. However, that is not their most terrifying aspect. Unlike other demons previously mentioned, they are capable of a level of intellect that other creatures, including us, can only dream of attaining. If you ever catch a glimpse of an Archfiend, it's already too late. I'll give you guys a description, so you can picture it without having to see the real thing. I promise, you don't want to. Archfiends have the ability to shapeshift, but their true form is generally the same for all of them. Typically, they stand 12 to 20 feet tall, and are extremely muscular. Their heads often resemble bone with gleaming red eyes, and have large, jet black horns protruding from each side of their skull. The Archfiends' bodies often are made out of bone on the outside, like an exoskeleton, and have large bat-like wings jutting out of their backs. Giant hands whose fingers end in razor-sharp claws, and feet with large talons like those of an eagle or hawk. In the distance, through the camera, I saw my first Archfiend that day. It struck a chord of fear that I never felt before or since my first viewing of that beast. That chord was struck because he stared right back into the camera and into my soul. He knew I was watching him, pissing myself out of fright, but the look he gave me was not one of rage or malevolence, but one of mercy and sympathy. Perhaps the Archfiends could sense my emotions and pitied me for having to go through this ordeal. Looking in his glowing red eyes through the camera, I could feel that he meant us no harm, that he was basking in the glory of finally being free of hell. That night, before I went to bed, I watched the Archfiend stride to a place nearly 2 blocks from our house and sit down on a throne of rubble from the homes the other lesser demons had destroyed. He helped himself to a couple of fleeting wendigos for a snack he took great delight in. He savored every bite, every crunch the wendigo's bones made as he chewed. A circle of red clouds began forming in the sky over the center of town. What that could mean, I don't even want to guess. Just more nightmare fuel before I would eventually fall asleep for the night.